When it came to deciding on a topic for our presentation on the social contract, I thought both back to one of our class's first inquiries, what can be defined as a fulfilled life, and our last reading on Marxist theories concerning capitalism and alienation. In his economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1884, Karl Marx describes a high standard of living as rich experiences, fully developed emotions, closeness to other people, a good education, and so forth. The author then goes on to apply this to a political and social empowerment. A person with very few possessions, but with an intensive life, comes much closer to Marx's idea of a happy human being than a well-paid worker who can afford to buy many more consumer goods, but who is neither informed enough to understand the society in which he lives, nor has the motivation to shape, in cooperation with his fellow co-workers, his working condition or the political system in which he lives. I then ask, in a modern sense, are we solely responsible for attaining those things, both tangible and intangible, that allow for a fulfilled life? I believe most individuals, regardless of socioeconomic status, recognize that handouts, even from institutions, are few and far between in the modern world. Yet at the same time, Americans have long since deserted the notion that our streets are paved with gold. The presence of opportunity itself even seems to be up for debate, especially those existing in a state of nature. I then ask, to what extent is our government responsible for establishing a foundation for the citizenry to construct their lives upon? Early social contract theories, such as those proposed by Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau, are essentially concerned with investigating the ideas of social cooperation and, to a greater extent, of political obligation. Social contract arguments were used originally as a way of justifying the obligation to obey the law, or, more generally, the acceptance of authoritative governmental decisions. Modern social contract theories, on the other hand, take the existence of the modern state as a given. The modern social contract, then, is employed as a mechanism for identifying proper social institutions and policies that reflect justice as the basic virtue of society. It would seem that the central attribute of social contract ideas is to perform an important legitimizing function. I will not pretend that I am qualified to debate the intricacies of just how expansive the welfare state should be or how it should operate, but I do believe the government should abandon policies, or at least reform those, that curtail equality by making decisions for an alienated public rather than alongside them. I do not doubt the tireless efforts of bureaucrats in their efforts to establish and expand the welfare state, but philosophers such as Susan Bickford scoff at these endeavors as the creation process of policies is fundamentally flawed. With the highly segregated nature of the contemporary city, Bickford proposes that often the primary way in which we learn about our outside world is through the media, which of course is fraught with bias. To her, we are no longer moving within or negotiating around diverse strangers in a shared material world, but rather within a certain kind of bounded space that determines who and what we perceive. Who we happen to see regularly as we negotiate our world has an influence on who we think of as citizens, those whose perspectives we think should be taken into account for political decision-making. Democratic politics are thus endangered as we see the world only as it exists behind our walls. Of course, this single-minded attitude is only available to the privileged, as minority groups can never eliminate the dominant culture. Yet for as much as they are subjected to this dominance, they can never identify it. For as Elijah Anderson states in Decent and Street Families, almost everyone residing in poor inner-city neighborhoods is struggling financially and therefore feels a certain distance from the rest of America. Alas, my feeble fifth-year senior brain is stumped on how to resolve the stratification of America's races and classes. What I can suggest, however, without going too far above my head, is to abandon passive policy making for a much more interactive and ethnographic approach. As you suggested yourself, Dr. Keegan, when it comes to empowering our urban centers for change, consciousness raising is key.